to the International Conference in International Relations, IRe2025, organized by the Department of International Relations, University of Colombo. This year's conference is centered on the theme Global South in International Relations, Imperatives and Impediments. The forum seeks to broaden the horizons of knowledge, particularly for emerging researchers, by exploring the Global South's growing influence, agency, and leadership in shaping the international order. And to formally open the proceedings, may I now respectfully invite Dr. Pavitra Jayawardena, Chair of INCO IR 2025 and the Head of the Department of International Relations, University of Colombo, to deliver the welcome address.
Good morning, distinguished guests, presenters, participants, and friends. It is with great pleasure and a deep sense of responsibility that I welcome you to the International Conference on International Relations, INCOIR 2025, the flagship annual conference of our department. This year, we focus on Global South in international relations, as we wanted to contribute to the critical intellectual conversations on the evolving role of Global South in international affairs. At the outset, I'm delighted to extend a very warm welcome to Professor Indika Karunatilaka, Vice Chancellor of the University of Colombo. Thank you, sir, for graciously accepting our invitation and joining with us today, despite your demanding schedule. I also welcome His Excellency Purna Bahadur Nepali, the Ambassador of Nepal to Sri Lanka, to the Faculty of Arts and to the conference. Thank you, sir, for your interest on our event and for joining with us today. I also wish to warmly welcome Senior Professor Lasantha Manawadu, the Dean of the Faculty of Arts, whose guidance and unwavering support have been crucial in organizing this conference. A very special welcome goes to Dr. Shweta Singh, Associate Professor of the Department of International Relations, South Asian University, New Delhi, India, a university established by SAARC nations. Dr. Singh, we are delighted to have you back with us after more than a decade. When you last joined us in 2014, the conference theme was Sri Lanka in World Affairs. Since then, much has changed in the world as well as in our country and the region, and we're eagerly looking forward to your reflections on Global South in today's context. I also extend a warm welcome to all the deans of the faculties, the registrar and bursa of the university, and special welcome to all the heads of our departments and directors of institutes at our very own faculty. Your presence here truly reflects the spirit of collaboration and interdisciplinary solidarity that defines our faculty. I would like to extend a warm welcome to all the distinguished invited guests who took time from their busy schedules to be with us today to talk about Global South. We are honored to have representatives from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, various diplomatic missions, institutions, and sister universities and faculties. A special welcome to Dr. Kaushalya Kumarasinghe, Director of the SAARC Cultural Center, Deputy Director, Mr. M.A.M. Hakim from the Center for the Study of Human Rights, Professor Senathi Racha, Director, the Center for Contemporary Indian Studies, and Executive Director, BCIS, Ms. Priyanthi Fernando, and all others. I also like to welcome the Senior Assistant Registrar and the Deputy Bursa of the faculty and the Assistant Registrar of the Academic Publications, whose support makes our research and academic work possible at the university. To our presenters, those gathered here in Colombo, and those joining us virtually, welcome. The hybrid format of today's conference has enabled us to bring 32 articles and 35 researchers from across Sri Lanka and around the world, enriching the scope and the depth of our discussions. Allow me to briefly highlight the range of institutions and expertise represented here in Colombo today. From Sri Lanka, our presenters join us from our very own department and the faculty at the University of Colombo, University of Sri Jayawardenepura, Open University of Sri Lanka, University of Peradeniya, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Bandaranaike International Diplomatic Training Institute, Center for Poverty Analysis, General Sir John Kotalawala Defence University, Regional Centre for Strategic Studies, National Science Foundation, and International Women's Development Foundation. We are equally honored to welcome our international participants representing institutions such as South Asian University, New Delhi, India, Pondicherry University, India, Kautilya School of Public Policy, India, Bangladesh University of Professionals, Bangladesh, SAARC Secretariat, Kathmandu, Nepal, Northwestern University, United States, University of Auckland, New Zealand, Skills Institute, New Zealand, IDESO Universidad Guadalajara, Mexico, and Friedrich Schiller University, Jena, Germany. As a department, we take pride, humble pride, in creating this platform where such a diverse group of researchers and practitioners could come together. On behalf of the University of Colombo, I extend a very warm welcome once again to all our presenters. I also warmly welcome our external resource persons at the Master of Arts in the International Relations and our long-standing friends who continue to strengthen the department's academic life. And finally, to both online and on-site participants, a very special welcome. And to our students, both postgraduate and undergraduate, you are the heart of our department. Your curiosity, ideas, and energy inspire us every day, and we hope this conference will, in turn, inspire you to think and engage deeply with the evolving Global South discourse. The theme we explore this year is both timely and urgent. The Global South, a contested term, has become increasingly visible on the world stage, at times as a source of hope, at times as a site of uncertainty, and often as a subject of intense debate. Through this conference organized here at the University of Colombo, our aim is to critically engage with the idea and to contribute to shaping a more inclusive and equitable international order. With this spirit, I extend my warmest welcome to all of you, confident that we share a common commitment to advancing equity and fairness in global affairs. So let's engage, question, debate, and collaborate with the ideas presented today. I wish you a productive, inspiring, and a memorable IRe 2025. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam, for those insightful words. Next, we are honored to hear from Senior Professor Lasantha Manavadu, Dean of the Faculty of Arts, University of Colombo. Dear sir, I kindly invite you to address the gathering.
Good morning, everyone. The Vice Chancellor, Sir, University of Colombo, Professor Indika Karunatilaka, and the Nepali Ambassador to Sri Lanka, and our keynote speaker, and the head of the department in IR, and academic members of the faculty, professors, senior professors from A to Z, from top to down, and members of the head table, and Swaminathan, and more importantly, our paper presenters. Once again, good morning. Yes, when you look at that, the title this time, INCO IRE 2025. So the O is a globe, that is international. So being a geographer, the map, a picture is worth than 1,000 words. That is my proverb. With that, I believe 2025, we started IR department conferences somewhere in 20 years. Then I hope it will go until maybe nth number in the world. So I suppose maybe 25, maybe 50, 75, whatever. Yeah, that is my wish. And let me congratulate to the Department of IR. I know it's a very small department. With at present only 5 members are there. Very soon there may be another 2 members, most probably from next week. Anyway, it's a very small, but their energy. They are actually no internal and external jerks. That's what I'm understanding. Because they work as a family. So that's why the final output is very impressive. So, organizing such an event, the conference, especially the discipline-based conference, very difficult, very time-consuming, very tedious, I know. So calling up maybe abstracts, the full papers sometime, the finding reviewers, very, very difficult. And also editing and the printing finally and the communicate with the people is very hard, very difficult. But with a very few members, they have done that part. Normally we start a conference, at least we need a year. So anyway, the Department of IR, but finally we have to think the financial aspects. But IR, once again, so they have enough. The department account is very big. Yes, because I have the statistics. Anyway, but the logistics arrangements and you have to invite a keynote speaker from somewhere, very difficult task. So anyway, they have done it. Now they have come to the end. Today is the wedding day, and I would say, but small is beautiful. Small is beautiful. So I don't want to explain why I said small is beautiful. You will get to know very soon. Also, as you all are well aware, so the national universities, we have established national universities as teaching universities, long time back, 100 years back, sometime. But now we have to rethink whether we should continue our universities as teaching universities. So I believe now this is the time to discuss, to convert our national universities into the research universities. The teaching research may be combined universities. Therefore, we have to promote our research aspects. So, for University of Colombo, we provide, maybe last year, we received 8 or 9 small research grants to the faculty. But this time maybe more, but we have to promote research. So then only, especially then how we can promote the research in a faculty, in a department. So we need more collaborations. So that's why we were thinking whether we can sign a MOU with South Asian University. So that's possible. And please encourage our junior and mid-level staff. So our last time we received another 5 or 6 small grants from UNFPA. And now our junior members, they are motivated. So push them, allow them to do and more research. And finally, we have to disseminate our knowledge share our knowledge with the others. That's why we need this kind of conferences and discussions, dialogue. So I hope other departments also, I know single department and demography department, they are also organizing discipline-based conferences. I hope this will continue other departments too. And I don't want to take much time. And I know Vice Chancellor has to leave this place very soon. With this, as our head wished, this should be a very productive whole day until 5:30. Yes, this will continue until 5:30. I'll try to be here maybe until 10:30. I hope you will be here. You will contribute positively and help to IR department to continue this for next couple of years. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir, for those inspiring words. It is now my privilege to invite Professor Indika Karunatilaka, Vice Chancellor of the University of Colombo, to address us all.
Honorable Mahasangha, Senior Professor Lasantha Manavadu, the Dean of the Faculty of Arts, University of Colombo, Your Excellency Purna Bahadur Nepali, the Ambassador of Nepal to Sri Lanka, and all the members from the diplomatic missions, Dr. Shweta Singh from the South Asian University, our keynote speaker, Dr. Pavitra Jayawardena, the conference chairperson, Professor Chaminda Padmakumara, the conference secretary, all the professors, academic staff members, all the resource persons from different countries, as well as the presenters, and all the conference participants, and very especially dear students. At the very outset, I would like to congratulate the department for organizing an international conference. And I think this is truly an international conference. Sometimes we see conferences carrying the tag of international conference, but generally, mainly the local participants or maybe one or two resources persons from other countries. For a conference to be truly an international conference, there need to be international participants. So I can see there are a lot of high-level international participants also. From the diplomatic level downwards, we have very high-level international participants. And also, I like to thank you for making this conference a blended conference, a hybrid conference, as we may say. This experience we started during COVID time. It was a blessing in disguise, and I'm also happy that I was also in part of introducing this concept to the country, because that opens up a lot of opportunities for us to reach out and to make a conference truly international. Another advantage is also that you can electronically record the video recordings so that the evidence and the keynote speeches, all these will be there, and we can make use of them in a very positive way. And I saw a lot of interesting articles, a lot of interesting research that will be presented during the course of the day. I actually feel a little sad because I will not be able to stay here for the whole day, because there is another commitment that I have to leave for the Sri Lanka University Games. Again, the University of Colombo is doing very well, so need to go to Rajarata Mihintale, Rajarata University for that purpose. So unfortunately, but I request the conference chairperson to keep the recordings, because we are having this hybrid mode. Another request is that since there are a lot of interesting and very important studies being conducted, I request from all the presenters, all the researchers, to convert them into journal articles and publish. That's very, very important. We should not just stop at publishing and presenting at international conference. We have to go to the next level, and we need to publish them in international journals. If possible, high-level index international journals. Once again, this is a very important conference, important topic, especially considering the current interest, the geopolitical interest the Sri Lanka is having due to the current situation, what's taking place in this region, as well as if you take United States, if you take Australia, what's happening at the moment, or even UK, there are a lot of trends, and there are some trends that may not be very encouraging, some trends that may be rather disturbing. But on the other hand, as a blessing in disguise, because of all these disturbing trends, now the focus is becoming more stronger towards the South Asian region. If you look at what's happening in Australia, or if you look at what's happening in UK, there are some issues. So even even in the United States, there are some concerns. So at the moment, as the Vice Chancellor, I had the privilege and pleasure of welcoming many international diplomats, including Your Excellency, the Ambassador of Nepal. And it's a privilege, and it's an honor for the University of Colombo, and we are very much looking forward to collaborate with all of you. And if you think of this very timely topic, the South-South collaboration, it was a topic that has been there for many decades, I suppose. But now I think it's high time that we move away from the sentimentals or just the value of the phrase, and we have to move towards operationalizing. And my understanding is the SARC, even though it may not have the same rigor that it was there some time ago, this may be a golden opportunity to reactivate, and probably our keynote speaker at the South Asian University can play a major role. Yeah, that's very important when it comes to South-South collaboration. Even though Professor Manwadu might say that we are above the equator, north of the equator, so we are not really south, but again, all of us, including the Dean, we are aware that we are looking at it not in the geographical sense, but in the geopolitical sense. So in that way, we all belong to the global south. So I think we have a role to improve our networking and the South-South partnership, And very importantly, that should go to our younger generation. And many of you are here, which I am happy to see, because there are a lot of opportunities available within the region. That's very important. Because now see a lot of our students soon after graduation, they move to either US or they want to go to Australia or UK. It's fine going to Australia, UK, those countries, fine, and getting the PhDs and coming back is really great. It's fine. But on the other hand, we have to think about the opportunities that are easily available, very accessible within our region also. That is where this collaboration becomes very important. Once again, I wish you all the very best for this great initiative, and thank you very much for organizing.
Thank you very much, dear sir. Now, we take a moment to appreciate the guidance of our stakeholders today. To present the tokens of appreciation for our Vice Chancellor and the Faculty Dean, I cordially invite the Head of the Department of International Relations, Dr. Pavitra Jayawardena. And to accept our gestures of gratitude, I cordially invite the Vice Chancellor of the University of Colombo, Professor Indiga Karunatilaka, and the Dean of the Faculty of Arts, Senior Professor Lasantha Manavadu. Thank you very much. It is now time for the keynote of this morning. To introduce our keynote speaker and provide an overview for today, I cordially invite Dr. Kulani Vijaypahu, Senior Lecturer of the Department of International Relations.
Thank you so much, Amasha. Very good morning, all of you. Distinguished guests, colleagues, and my dear friends. On behalf of IRe2025, it is my great pleasure to introduce you our keynote speaker, Dr. Shweta Singh, Associate Professor of International Relations at South Asian University, New Delhi. Dr. Singh is a leading voice in feminist international relations and critical peace and conflict studies in South Asia. Her scholarship illuminates the politics of everyday, the evolution of norms and the women, peace and security agenda, and the intersections of gender and populism, with the grounded insights on Afghanistan, Kashmir, and Sri Lanka. She brings to these debates a distinctly South Asian vocabulary and the feminist genealogy of international relations that challenges us to rethink who speaks, who is heard, and whose security concerns. Dr. Singh's leadership spans from scholarship to practice as well. She has served as a UN Women International expert on populism, nationalism, and gender, and also served as an academic advisor to UNESCO MGIEP on preventing violent extremism through education, and she served as the program co-chair of the International Studies Association and a member of the ISA Committee on Engagement with Global South members. Her contributions have been recognized with the United States Leadership Award in 2010 and Mahab al-Haq Award in 2013 and the ISA Leadership Recognition Award from San Francisco in 2024. She serves on the editorial boards of International Studies, Quarterly and Strategic Affairs, and co-edits the Edinburgh University Press series, Feminist Studies on Peace, Justice, and Violence. With that very brief introduction, let me now invite Dr. Shweta Singh to deliver her keynote speech today. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you. It is indeed what should I say? It's indeed a privilege and honor to be here at the University of Colombo. And thank you, Honorable Vice Chancellor, Honorable Dean, my colleague, very dear colleague, Pavitra and Chaminda, all dignitaries, old friends that I see, Professor Naini Malagoda, Priyanti, everyone. I really want to say that this is definitely a special moment and an occasion. Especially also so that today morning, I was thinking about the location of this conference. We're talking about Global South, and more often than not, we talk about the Global South in the Global North. So for us today, I think the location of this conference at the University of Colombo is particularly important as we think through epistemic disruptions. I think locations are so important. And I think, so I was really thinking about, where do we begin the story? And I think it's really interesting and important to look at the diversity of voices that are present in this room. Thank you, Your Excellency, Ambassador of Nepal, all the dignitaries that I see, because as we walk through these ideas around Global South, I think the question of voice and agency is something that keeps coming back to me. So the question, and I thought, let's start off with some questions. I might not actually have the answers. So how do we think and reimagine the Global South in what seems to be a moment of disruption? And what is this moment of disruption? What is this moment of rupture that we are talking about? And why does this category of Global South becomes pertinent to us when we are thinking about this moment of disruption? How do we locate the Global South moving in between and beyond geographies? I do want to stress on this point. How do we actually move beyond geographies, beyond cartographic imaginations? And why is that pertinent? In the process, how do we navigate solidarity and ruptures given the disciplinary diktats, boundaries, and politics of reification? I come from the discipline of IR, and the discipline of IR also defines boundaries very differently. So in this lecture, I thought I will walk with you. We'll walk together to think about Global South. And what I do is I take a clue from Antonio Gramsci, and I provoke you to think about the moment in time which he calls as the age of monsters. So how do you actually think about the age of monsters, the Global South? And what is this category that he puts for us? Now, it's a very interesting idea. And I thought when we are thinking about this age of monsters and Global South, what comes back to me is the idea of interregnum. And so much is happening around us. What we keep looking at is, we looked at the weaponization of trade that is happening. We are looking at the SCO meet that is happening. We are looking at the Global South solidarity movements that we are talking about. But what is this age of monsters? And what is this idea of interregnum that we are talking about? And why do we need to situate this category of Global South in this particular moment in time and history? Now, interregnum is a moment in time and history when older socio-political orders are collapsing. They're dying, but no new stable order has yet emerged. The transitional moment in time and space brings in what is called this disruption. Now, what are these forces of disruption that we are talking about? Onslaught of authoritarianism, populism, extremism, crisis of the liberal world order that has defined world politics for last few decades. For us, in current moment in time, it is also marked by a reversal to reification of border and boundaries, marked by politics of nativism and the pursuit of brute power. Then, from where we are standing in today, standing in this particular space, in the University of Colombo, in Colombo, in Sri Lanka, from our very respective positionality, how do we start to think about this interregnum? And when I'm talking about positionality, I think positionality is extremely important when we are thinking about this category of Global South. Now, the key question that keeps coming back is Global South a macro category? Is it a geographical category? How do we actually start to narrate the story of Global South? Is it a linear story on Global South? Can I actually have neat categories to think about the category of Global South? What are these forces that are embedded in this context? And what I do invite you to do is to walk with me within this embedded networks, sites, scales of struggle, solidarity, disobedience, and rupture from which we locate and start to construe the warp and waft of Global South. This would mean that we collectively and individually embrace and reimagine what is called epistemic disobedience. I think we were talking about disciplinary sites. And I think when we are talking about the disciplinary sites, the category of epistemic disobedience becomes extremely important. The politics of knowledge production. We were talking about how many of our students go to the global north. It's very interesting to see how we want to study Sri Lanka, for instance, in United States of America. Why are we not talking about studying Sri Lanka in Sri Lanka or beyond in South Asia? There's so much of research that is happening. There is so much of networking embedded sites. Now, this is not to say that, this is a kind of a rupture that we are talking about. But what I'm just pushing you to think about is, what is epistemic disobedience? How do we start to think about epistemic disobedience when we are thinking about this conference theme for this entire day today? What has been invisibilized and erased? I want to draw your attention to the politics of erasures and invisibility. And here I also want to bring to you the point on linguistic colonialism. I think when we are talking about disciplinary diktats, something that we often not think about is linguistic colonialism. Why is it that we're not having, I would say, burgeoning research in the context of going back to Pali texts, Sinhalese texts, Bengali text, Malayalam text, the linguistic, the vast array of languages that we have in South Asia. Have we looked at that? What would epistemic disobedience mean in that context? So I think I call your attention to the politics of voice and agency, representation and representability, order and disorder, both in our framing of Global South as a political subject and beyond. I would say for me today, when I'm looking at the Global South, it is a place of struggle, traversing both coloniality and domination in its pursuit for decolonial freedom. Now, I thought we have young people in this room, and there is a generational dialogue that I always talk about. And I think it's very important to look at a few stories. I always feel that when we're talking about the act of storytelling, let's go back to a few stories. So here is a narrative. This is a narrative that I draw from Lande. Now, Lande is a folk song from Afghanistan. Now, let me just read that out to you. This is a translation. One day you look and find I'm gone. Rahila Muska, as quoted in Eliza Griswold. The narrative is a folk couplet called Lande, an oral and often anonymous song sung by Pashto women in Afghanistan, who have used this oral tradition to articulate truth about war, violence, separation, homeland, and grief. The teenage poet who sung this called herself Rahila Muska. Eliza Griswold, who worked on Lande's project, writes that Rahila Muska, who lived in Helmand, a Taliban stronghold, Muska, like many young rural Afghan women, was not allowed to leave home. Poetry was her only form of connection and community, and perhaps her only form of resistance. In 2010, Muska set herself on fire, as her brothers had discovered that she wrote poetry, and was beaten up badly before she herself set herself on fire. I bring to you the voice of Muska, the voice of resistance and solidarity, to highlight the most unconventional ways to think about the ideas of relationality in Global South. My attempt here is not to sound coherent, but the very purpose is to articulate difference. I bring to you another narrative, and this narrative, I take you back to 1991 in Bangladesh. Many voices, if you speak to many voices, they would remember and recall the night of April 1991, when a massive tropical cyclone barreled into Bangladesh. Farhana Sultana, who's written extensively in her piece titled The Unbearable Heaviness of Climate Coloniality, she writes, and I quote, the sound of the storm, the trees churning, the buildings shaking, scared me throughout the night. I was terrified by the sounds, the deafening sounds across the land, and the howling winds outside that battered everything, knowing instinctively a disaster was unfolding. News broke the next day of the devastation where a 20-foot tall sea surge killed thousands overnight. Later, we would learn it was up to 150,000 people. So many people just stolen by the sea. A gamut of grief, worry, and guilt filled me that day. Subsequent days, most of the country, which is Bangladesh, is at sea level. So the water just surged in and took away everything. We are talking about this surrounded in the oceanic space that we are located here today. In many of these stories is also the story of Suleiman, again from Bangladesh. For him, the night of 29 comes and goes. For many, it comes and goes. But for Muhammad Suleiman, who witnessed the devastation firsthand, he lost his elder sister that night in 1991, which never ended. It returns again and again. And I again bring to you his narrative, his voice, and I quote, "We were visiting my uncle's in-laws in a village called Sharai Tala in Dhangata, an island within Maheshkhali. Their house was made of tin and mud. Late at night, suddenly, waist-deep water surged into the yard. We had no idea what to do. In panic, around 10 to 12 of us climbed onto the tin roof of a nearby house with mud wall. As the cyclone's fury grew stronger, the mud walls absorbed water and began to collapse. In a desperate move, the group cut through the tin roof to stay above the rising flood. The entire flood structure was soon floating on water. What I do remember is that I was slipping. This is Suleiman's voice, standing unsteady on the tin roof. Firoza, my elder sister, gave me a hand beneath my feet and lifted me up. I managed to get onto the tree and save my life, but I lost my sister the other day. The night did not just bring a storm, he said. It divided our lives into before and after. April 29, 2025 marks the 34th anniversary of the 1991 supercyclone known as Cyclone Gorky, which struck the southeastern coast of Bangladesh, making landfall near Chattargram. The disaster left behind massive economic damage, wiping out homes, livelihood, and infrastructure. Fast forward, I bring back the voice of Farhana Sultana. She says, "I constantly worry. I worry what happens to those who are drowned out from more powerful storms and surges, whose water sources are increasingly salinized from this rising sea and encroaching seawater. Where do people take this collective trauma?" And I want to emphasize, where do people take this collective trauma, grief, and anger? The disproportionate burden of climate change is falling on, or climate damage is falling on formerly colonized and brutally racialized developing communities in the world. Climate colonialism is for real. I really want to emphasize that. We in this oceanic space, the Indian Ocean space that we are, in this current moment in time, we are still colonized, but this time through climate change, the development industry, and globalization. I take you to another story. I have 4 stories before I start to talk about the disruptions. Now, this story is located in the context in Argentina. And this is a story, and I bring to you the story from the indigenous community. Our land is drying up, and our water is polluted, says Nati Machacha, one of the protesters manning a roadblock in the village of Purmamarca, high in the Andes Mountains. Miss Machacha is a spokesperson for the indigenous groups living in Jujuy, a province in northern Argentina. Now, why is Jujoy important? Why is this small little village important? It's a village which has become to be known as the lithium triangle. You know, you all keep looking at the whole context of EV cars. Now, this is a village that we are talking about, a lithium triangle, a stretch of the Andes straddling the tri-border area between Argentina, Bolivia, and Chile, which holds the world's biggest and largest reserves of lithium. It has become specially sought after electrical cars, which also uses lithium in their batteries, now which is becoming very popular. Argentina is the world's #4 lithium producer. But some residents say not only are they benefiting from the industry, but their way of life is they are not benefiting from the industry, but their way of life is under threat as lithium extraction, and I want you to pay attention to this point, lithium extraction requires huge amounts of water, about 2 million liters per ton. And locals locals like Nati Machacha, who live off the land and raise cattle in the predominantly rural area, fear that there is drying of the soil and polluting the water. If this goes on, we will soon starve and become ill, she warns. Now, listening, feeling, sensing this narrative, while we think about Afghanistan, Bangladesh, and Argentina, I want to further dislocate. I want to bring in not a geographical location, but to think about ruptures within a refugee body. Now, what is it that we are thinking about rupture through a refugee body? I want to nudge you to think about racialized and sexualized allegory deployed, for instance, for a brown man in a white world. A key word that I could draw your attention to is what the white world deploys as refugee crisis, something that we keep hearing, something which is part of the media narrative that we are everyday media narrative. Refugee crisis. What does this word crisis signify? Is this the category refugee crisis, a floating signifier representing the anxieties and fears of the white world? In this floating signifier, there is a discursively construed other, an enemy other. It can be and this enemy other actually intersects with differing identity constellations, class, region, religion, caste, differing identity constellation. And what echoes for me is what Maito Selmbondi notes and says, crisis can be perceived as a perpetual frame, breaking moment that dismantles and the certainties and normative narratives of a nation, sovereignty, social bonds, and belonging for people on the ground. But we need to recognize, as I said, that this narrative of othering is not embedded in strictly racialized analogies, but are also intertwined with intersectional constellation. So what does it do? Does it provoke us to think, is there a South within a North? Or is there a South within a South? And then how do we start to think about the socio-temporal category? So I'm reminded of the homeless population, for instance, in the city of St. Francisco. I'm also talking about the Rohingya refugee discourse in the context of South Asia. And in all this thinking and senses, what I do is foreground is the messiness of the story, the messiness of this category called Global South. What is this messiness do we talk about? So coming back to the story, where do I now begin the story? Is this a linear story? These are a few narratives that I thought for us to think about. Can I really accord a template to this story? Or can I really capture the cacophony of voices that I'm talking about? You know, can I really capture these cacophony of voices in this macro category called Global South? And in this story, how do I navigate pieces of history, or rather pieces of many histories that we are talking about? Are these pieces from and about history? Are they histories that are emerging from within the context? Or are these histories products of colonial historiography? And if so, how do we then start to think about this category? And I thought for all of us, since we are thinking about this conference to the day, what I thought was to foreground Walter Mignalo. And Walter Mignalo's work is quite fascinating when we are thinking about this category of Global South. And what I do bring to you is points of origination and roots of dispersion. And I think that's extremely important, points of origination and roots of dispersion, which I think are key concepts to trace geopolitics of knowing, sensing, believing, as well as the body politics of knowing, sensing, and understanding. The four narratives that put forth to you for critical reflection is an act to dismantle reification. We often freeze frames in academic discourse. We often freeze macro categories. It's extremely interesting, when I have students in the class and I ask them to think about Nepal, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, or Maldives, they bring in these concepts which came into being to define great power politics. Now, how do you study a state like Maldives or Bangladesh or Sri Lanka to think about frames that are coming, that were actually deployed to understand maybe United States of America? Our context is very different. So how do we start to think about the politics of knowledge production? So is Global South a geographical connotation? Is it a socio-temporal space? Or is it an epistemic space that is rooted in the politics of struggle, resistance, with attention to politics of decoloniality? If it is an epistemic space, and that is what I'm hoping that the conference would be able to foreground with the diversity of voices that we are talking about, how do we then navigate this category? I thought we could think, nudge, or struggle to write the story. I would urge you to be on that journey, which is marked by acts of what I call epistemic disobedience. I think that's something very important for us as researchers. So what do acts of epistemic disobedience look like? What does it entail when we are thinking about, academic spaces, when we are thinking about praxis, when we are thinking about research, when we are thinking about collaboration? What does this epistemic disobedience look like? It is a geo-epistemic, and where is it rooted? For me, I would say, taking a clue from Mignalo, it is rooted in the politics of decoloniality. And I think that's extremely important for us. Something that we need to recognize is that the process of knowledge production has been deeply intertwined with colonial hierarchies, with discursive sites. And for instance, when you marginalize Lande, you marginalize the politics of space. Nivi Manchanda very beautifully writes that Afghanistan then becomes a discursive site that represents an intrinsically violent place in the colonial historiography, and where the colonizer is bereft of that coloniality that we are talking about. In a story systematically that is crafted by the colonizers and colonial historiography, what is systematically marginalized is the stories from the context, the stories from within the context. Now, for instance, Afghanistan and the story of resistance of these young Pashto women are then not recognized as legitimate modes of knowledge production. But is that not political? What becomes the sites and spaces to do politics? What becomes sites and spaces to understand this category of Global South in that context? So, what does Walker do? Rob Walker, who's been writing extensively on this, says, as young researchers, try to read the absences between the presences. What are the absences when you walk from here to there? It is a story of absences. It is a story of absences within, beyond, and above and below Global South that we are talking about. And when we curate the story of absences, I think the decolonial matrix becomes extremely important for us to think about. Now, the second point when we are thinking about this act of epistemic disobedience, for me, is the politics of language. Language is extremely important, I mean, at the South Asian University, sometimes I see first-generation learners who've never actually studied in the English language. Now, what do you do? These are very bright young minds, and they have very good ideas. And that's not just at the university space here, but you would also see it in university spaces across region. There is linguistic colonialism. We've all benefited from the use of the English language. But have we ever talking about journals allowing you to publish in Sinhalese or Tamil. There's so much of gatekeeping. It would not be finding a space. I mean, very interestingly, I was the program chair for International Studies Association in 2024. And one of the things that we would often get requests is, can we actually allow presentations other than English? Now, ISA is a very global North institution. You know, we talk about global South and the global North, but it doesn't open up for different reasons of universality to languages outside or beyond. And if there are languages that are privileged in other spaces, how many South Asian languages find that space in this category that we are talking about? So Gayatri Spivak, you know, I think she brings to us this conundrum in the context of languages. She says, the problem of human discourse, and I quote, is generally seen as articulating itself in the play of three shifting concepts: language, world, and consciousness. We know no other world that is not organized as language. We operate with no other consciousness but one structured as a language. Language that we cannot possess, for we are operated by those languages as well. So my question to you, how has the epistemic categorization of Global South been limited and has been limited by linguistic colonialism, with a focus, of course, on the English language, which we are all beneficiaries of? But think about how many languages and dialects are spoken across the Global South. Standing here in Sri Lanka, an island nation with rich and textured history, I would urge you to go back and look at the rich tapestry of stories, of folk songs, of oral histories in Pali, in Sinhalese, in Tamil. Think through what insights does this bring to you on the category of Global South. And this is where we translate epistemic disobedience into the whole matrix, the decolonial matrix that we are talking about. It also is very important, and that's the third point that I thought I'll bring in, is because this pushes us towards recognizing the idea of pluriversality. I think when we are thinking about pluriversality, and I know there are deans and faculty members from across departments here, how do we talk about this interdisciplinarity within and movement beyond our disciplines in that context? Now, by promoting the idea of pluriversal IR, the idea of pluriversality, the idea of relationality, Mignalo calls for a decolonial rethinking that values diverse ways of knowing. And I want to underline that, diverse ways of knowing. You know, if you're looking at South Asian history, there's this whole context of oral histories that we are talking about. Do we actually give that the legitimacy in the context of academic modes of knowledge production? And in that context, I would push you, young people, to think about the rich and textured sources that go beyond the English language and the defined sources that we are trained in the context of epistemologically dictats that we are talking about. So think about international through these differing sites that we are talking about. And this brings me to the third point, the related point on the whole context of representation and representability. So when we are thinking about Global South, how do we foreground and think through the template of voice, locating it within and beyond this meta template of Global South? I urge you to go back to the voice of the indigenous community in Argentina, or the lived experience of the women in the littoral state of Bangladesh. And in that act of storytelling, what is it that I would foreground? I would foreground the second P beyond pluriversality, and that is the idea of polyphony. Now, what is this idea of polyphony? It's been written extensively in the context of academic literature, and something that speaks to this category of Global South. Now, polyphony has been written by Vaishpesh, Roy Chaudhary, and Hogg, and I urge you to think about this idea of polyphony, who bring this into their own scholarship. And why is it significant when we are thinking? Now, a focus on polyphonies. We are talking about these multiple voices. We are talking about these cacophony of voices. We are talking about these multiple stories. Now, how do we actually start to weave these stories? And I think a focus on polyphonies allows us to connect specific meanings and their implications with a broader take on inherent complexities of macro categories. In fact, working with and through polyphonies helps us to recognize the evolving agency within the category of Global South. So what does it mean when we are thinking about acts of epistemic disobedience as praxis? It helps us navigate the neatly carved out spaces, north and south, east and west. I think you'll agree with me. Spaces are layered beyond and in between geographical spaces. So it is important to start to look at the ebb and flow, or rather the fluidity that is characteristic of this category of Global South, than reify this category. And when you do that, be attentive to the critical question of positionality and reflexivity. In some ways, be attentive also to the slippery terrain, the way the category of Global South can be used to box people. You know, there is this whole politics of tick box. You have a Global South committee in most of the international conferences that you're talking about, and one brown woman, two brown men, or two brown women, one brown man becomes a tick box, a check box for this politics of Global South. So be attentive to that slippery terrain where there is an attempt to box this category of Global South that we are talking about. And that is why the idea of polyphony becomes important. Now, I want to spend a few minutes on this idea of polyphonies. What would this entail for you as a researcher? I do know that there are young people who are part of this. Now, what would this mean to you as a researcher? You would both wander and wander, you know, W-O-N-D-R and W-A-N-D-R. That's all the dilemma that we have. You both wander and wander, and maybe start to think about this messiness that we are talking about, the messy category of the Global South. And it brings to us the connected challenge of what scholars talk about ontological anxiety. There is this whole context of disciplinary diktats and ontological anxiety that we are talking about. And what does this do? Now, this takes us back to what Walter Mignalo was talking about, the points of origination and dispersion of knowledge. And in this discipline of IR, with both its ideas of disciplinarity and diktats, what are the kind of classics you go back to? You know, I'm sure you have a course on political theory, or you have a course on international relations theory. What are the kind of classics that you read when you're thinking about state, power, sovereignty? What are the kind of citations that you have? Is it all the white men who are being cited in the context, or is it also citations that are speaking to the context that we are talking about, politics of citations? Now, in that context, for instance, I would urge young minds to stand where you are, where you come from. I would urge you to think about the category of Global South. So for instance, and this is something that I've been thinking about. So for instance, and I would say that, you know, there would be a lot of expertise within the University of Colombo. What does the Mahavamsa bring to you in terms of non-hierarchical ways of thinking? The ideas of relationality that we are talking about. The Mahavamsa is such a rich and textured text. Have we done enough to research about the Mahavamsa in the context of non-hierarchical ways of thinking that we are talking about? And the whole context. In that context, I would take you and push you to think about the maritime identities that we are talking about, you know? So for instance, how is it that you're thinking about maritime identities in the context of Sri Lanka? And let me pause here, as I said, as we are standing here. Now, Sri Lanka has a rich and textured history, not just territorial history, but ideational history, and a rich documented maritime history. These documentaries, for instance, the entries on Silk routes. There are many of the inscriptions, the edicts that we are talking about. Now, how is it that we are talking about the whole context of connectors? How is it that we are talking about the whole context of trade routes that we are talking about? And this is a story that is not just innate to Sri Lanka. For instance, the story on Afghanistan. When you study Afghanistan, how do you categorize Afghanistan? Most colonial historiographers have categorized Afghanistan as barbaric, as uncivilized, something which is impenetrable. But Afghanistan was also a connector state, part of the Silk routes that we are talking about, the trade routes that we are talking about. But that part of history has been marginalized. So coming back here, a number of maps and travel accounts bear witness to the importance of Sri Lankan harbor towns and cities in the Silk routes of antiquity. These towns and cities, with their protective natural harbors, offered different kinds of interactions between various parts of the world that we are talking about. Now, you know, this has been well documented in Greek, in Italian, in Arabic, and Chinese manuscripts. You know, you can actually look at some of these documentation and these stories that we are talking about. One example, and I might not be pronouncing the name of the coastal town correctly, and I apologize for that, but one such example is the coastal town of Mantai. which flourished between 5th century BC and 13th century as a maritime trade center. The town situated on the western coast of Ireland was known to the early Greeks and appeared on the first known map produced by Ptolemy in the 6th century BC. There is also the accounts of Ibn Battuta, who undertook a pilgrimage to the mountain in the 14th century and detailed a number of important harbor cities, Arabic tombstones found in Gaul, as well as Sufi inscriptions discovered in Colombo. Furthermore, the town of Beruvala, situated south of Colombo, was known to the Francian missionary, and it was called Perivelis. And also, similarly, there are accounts of it in the context of Chinese travelogues that we are talking about. Now, why is it, and something that really struck me while I was thinking about this, because this is also an idea in the context of making, was two important ports which have been mentioned in the Mahavamsa, and maybe we need to do more research in that context, which is Jambukola and Mahatitha, which are two ports which are frequently alluded to in the Mahavamsa, unfolding the earliest historical eras of the island. But in the cacophony of voices, in the messiness of the story from the global south, has this history been marginalized? Has this history been on the margins? Have we paid enough attention? For us, I would say accomplices in the discipline of IR, have we given due attention to these stories, to these sites? Have we brought in that interdisciplinary dialogue that we are talking about? So in that context, what would embracing the 3 Ps mean for us? And I'm foregrounding the 3 Ps here: positionality, polyphonies, and pluriversality. These are the 3 Ps that I thought might come with. You might engage, resist, ally, build your solidarities, but do dab with this idea of the 3 Ps that we are talking about. How does it push you to think about the assemblages, the warp and weft of decolonial thought, what Mignalo talks about? Of course, this involves delinking from Western epistemologies, recovering what Mignalo says, suppressed non-Western knowledge systems from a position of exteriority. And I quote and underline from Mignalo. But that is where I want to reiterate our task as academics, as researchers, to push the boundaries of the epistemic category of Global South beyond the politics of reification. But in this age of interregnum, and that's my sound of caution, in this age of interregnum, marked by forces of authoritarianism and populism, what are the risks of and with decolonial praxis? It is important to acknowledge the challenge that the project of decolonial politics, we were having this conversation in ISA also with Sankar and Krishna. What does this mean in the context of decolonial praxis and the whole context of the age of monsters that we are talking about? The trap is very real, and the trap is of ethno-essentialism. It's a slippery terrain. How do you navigate this category of ethno-essentialism when you're thinking about decolonial politics? By invoking a generalizing anti-Western rhetoric of returning to local roots that draws on decolonial arguments, voices once again can be suppressed, marginalized, or boxed, all in the name of resistance and decentering the West. And of course, in the process, gender backlash, for instance, becomes very real. While we close and yet not close the frames of 3 Ps, positionality, polyphonies, and pluriversality, I do want to acknowledge the feminist depth to scholars, activists, and practitioners. And I feel extremely privileged to be standing in the space where Kumari Jayavardhane paved the way for what I always call as the 3 Ds: dialogue, difference, and dissidence. And it is here, as we think through this category of Global South, I call on you to pay attention to the temporality of struggle, resistance, and solidarity in the Global South. In doing so, walk on the path of epistemic disobedience, recognizing the hegemonic forces and the diktats of language, but still finding voice and agency in this idea of polyphony. In solidarity and struggle, I leave you with that thought for today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shweta Singh, for that illuminating keynote. You truly gave us many insights, and thank you for keeping us spellbound. And now, to present the token of appreciation for our very own keynote speaker, Dr. Shweta Singh, I cordially invite Dr. Pavitra Jayawardena, Head of the Department of International Relations. And now, to bring this inauguration to a close, I now invite Professor Chaminda Padmakumara, Secretary of IRe2025, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Thank you. A very good morning, Venerable Mahasangha, including Venerable Agalakada Sirisumana and Venerable Madihe Sugatiri Thero. Good morning, all the dignitaries and the respected invitees. It is privilege and great pleasure for me to extend a vote of thanks for this international conference organized by the Department of International Relations under the theme of Global South in International Relations, Imperatives and Impediments. This year's conference theme has valuable implications for understanding the common challenges faced by the Global South. And also, it shows the importance of having common understanding about the common issues we are having in the Global South, including geopolitical pressures, human security challenges, shifting economic paradigms, and the evolving societal and the environmental issues. Given the increasing significance of the research pertinent to the Global South that transcend conventional academic boundaries, INCOR 2025 will offer a valuable opportunity for scholars to share their research findings and to highlight pressing issues that we are facing today. First of all, on behalf of the Department of International Relations, I would like to thank our chief guest today, Vice Chancellor, University of Colombo, Professor Indika Karunatilaka, for gracing this inaugural session. Thank you very much, sir. We are grateful for you, for your support and the guidance given. And also, let me thank Ambassador of Nepal to Sri Lanka, His Excellency Purna Bahadur Nepali, for gracing this event. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation and gracing this occasion. I must mention our deep sense of appreciation to our own Dean of the Faculty of Art, Senior Professor Lasantha Manavadu, for his excellence, guidance, and continuous support to the Department of International Relations. So we highly appreciate it, sir. And also, I do believe that this would have been impossible without your guidance and support. And next, I would like to thank our keynote speaker, Dr. Shweta Singh, Associate Professor from the Department of International Relations, Faculty of International Studies, South Asian University, India, for delivering an insightful keynote address. I would like to take this opportunity to place on record our sincere thanks to you for sharing insightful thoughts. I think you asked valid and relevant questions about the Global South. So let me summarize what you said. Actually, Dr. Shweta Singh, you want to say how to challenge dominant knowledge prevailing in the world. So we need to change how we perceive Global South. I think we need to think of alternatives way of looking at Global South. I think that is what you want to share with us. And also, you specifically mentioned that how we can reach decolonized mind. I think our audience might have got valuable insight about how we think, how we should change our perception about the Global South. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation and delivering a great keynote address. Next, I thank our head of the department, Dr. Pavitra Jayawardena, conference chair. So thank you very much, Dr. Pavitra, for your leadership and guiding us. And also let me thank our senior staff members, all the department staff for their support. Then I must mention our appreciation to our administrative officers, including BERSA, registrars. So their administrative support was very instrumental. And specifically, I want to thank Deputy BERSA, Faculty of Art. Thank you very much for your support. And I thank all the directors, deputy directors who are present here, and the former ambassadors. So let me appreciate the given support by the abstract reviewers, conference organizing committee, student volunteers, and non-academic staff members. So you have, make sure that this event is efficiently conducted. And also my next appreciation goes to session chairs and the paper presenters. Thank you very much for sending your abstracts to international conference organized by the Department of International Relations. Last but not least, I should thank our undergraduate students and the postgraduate students. Thank you very much for your support, and have a pleasant day. And also, I do believe this conference will be a very successful and engaging one. Thank you once again.
Thank you very much, sir. With that, we conclude the inauguration of IRe 2025. We invite you all to join refreshments while we will serve until 11 a.m. Before we reconvene to technical sessions. And now, to provide you an overview of the technical sessions for the day, technical session 1, 2, and 3 will be held in the boardroom itself, while the technical sessions 4, 5, and 6 will be held in lecture room 229, which is in the second floor. So, ladies and gentlemen, engage, embrace, and enjoy the day. Thank you, and have a great day ahead.